And within 3 months of that happening with the first Treehouse, BuzzFeed reached out and was like, hey, we're doing a piece on the best Airbnbs in each state. And so like, that's how that happens. And I think the same thing happened with Netflix. They were like, wow, we're doing this episode on amazing vacation rentals. We're doing one on tree houses, doing our research, and keep seeing you guys.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. In just a moment, you meet Tori Bolt, co-founder of Bolt Farm, a celebrated nature retreat in Tennessee offering 23 meticulously designed villas and a plethora of amenities. In 2016, Tori and Seth Bolt embarked on a bold adventure, building their first luxury treehouse. Now, this was an intimate project that actually began as a handcrafted wedding gift from Seth to Tori. Neither Seth or Tori knew at the time that this gift would ultimately radically change their lives and launch them into experiential hospitality. Long before the surge in unique stays and experiential accommodations, the Bolts were leading the way, crafting spaces that balanced the serenity of nature with the sophistication of high-end design. And it wasn't long before their work caught the attention of Netflix's The World's Most Amazing Vacation Rentals, a feature that helped position Bolt Farm as a pioneer in the luxury glamping space. Seth Bolt, a longtime member of the Grammy-nominated band NEEDTOBREATHE, brought a unique perspective to the design process. Years of touring and experiencing hospitality across the spectrum informed the couple's meticulous approach to guest experience. The result? A collection of stays where every detail, from heated marble floors to handcrafted interiors, is intentional, offering guests a haven for rest, connection, and inspiration. In this episode, Tori and I explore how their first luxury treehouse laid the foundation for Bolt Farm's success, what it meant to be featured on Netflix and how the exposure transformed their brand, the journey from a small collection of unique stays to a full-fledged wellness resort with a 7-days-a-week spa and curated dining options. We also talk about the couple's vision for expansion, including discussions around franchising and strategic partnerships that maintain their signature level of quality and charm. And last but certainly not least, we talk about lessons learned from balancing bold creativity with operational excellence. Tori and Seth's story is one of creativity, resilience, and innovation. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Tori. Alrighty, folks, we are live. Tori, welcome to the show. It is such an honor to have you on today.
Thanks, Zach. Pumped to chat.
I have been following you guys for a long time, actually. And I think actually I was one of the people that first discovered Bolt Farm from Netflix. So that was that was the first time I had heard of you guys. I loved the Most Amazing Vacation Rentals or whatever the show was called. Saw your guys' feature and was like, and then once I got into the industry, I started hearing your names and I was like, why are these names so familiar? And then I remembered the show. So I'm a little starstruck here to be chatting with you today.
That's awesome. Usually that's the case for Seth because people are fans of his band, but yeah, I'm so glad that you found us from Netflix. That's awesome.
Well, and then of course, I grew up listening to, I have recently listened to Need to Breathe, and actually my aunt was like a super fan, and she actually introduced me to Need to Breathe. So it's very, very cool. Maybe we'll have some time to talk about that in a bit. But Tori, I really want to start at the beginning because you guys have told your story in several different ways and in several different mediums. But I'd love to hear just from you directly. Where does the story of Bolt Farm from Tori's perspective really begin?
Yeah. It literally started with love for our wedding day, which is like the sweetest thing. And usually when men hear that, they're like so mad at Seth for setting the bar so high. They're like, man, you had to make her a treehouse for your wedding day. Wow. But his dad is a builder. And so Seth grew up on the job site in construction with his dad and loved it. And in 2015, he convinced his dad to build a treehouse with him.
Mm.
This was actually before we met. So first it started with it just being a creative, respite for him when he would come off of tour to be back in nature and just like let his spirit kind of rest, right? And like in a very creative space. We meet in the process and he's like, okay, I'm not just going to make this a treehouse. I want to make it a romantic luxury treehouse that is worthy of our wedding day. And
Mm.
so that's what like took it up to that next level. So he gets credit for the interior design, the decor, all of it. People think it's me. It was all him, and it was a surprise to me on our wedding day. That was the first time I got to see it. It was so beautiful. We had our first look there, and we had our honeymoon there. And it was so special. Like we just purely and organically experienced it and
Wow.
had like literally like the treehouse effect happened to us. We put our phones down. We were playing music on the records, losing track of time, just being in the moment with each other. And we were like, more people need this. This is
Yeah.
special. And
Yeah.
that's literally what started it all.
And sorry, did you know that the treehouse was being built, or was that a surprise to you as well?
I knew it was being built,
Okay.
but I had no idea what the finished product would look like. Or like
Wow.
he would keep me away from it. He's like, you can't go inside. Like it's a surprise. And so like I remember the first time I saw it, I just started crying because it was so
Wow.
beautiful and special. You could feel the love and the intentionality poured into it. So
Wow.
I knew about it. I just didn't know the level.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
and had you guys stayed in places like this before? Like, did Seth source a lot of inspiration from other tree houses, or was this sort of like shooting in the dark a little bit?
It was shooting in the dark. I think he had one treehouse stay previous to
Okay.
that, like ever. And but it was nothing like ours. That being said though, he's traveled the world with his band, right, over the last 20 years, and he's experienced some of the best of hospitality and then a lot of the worst, right? Like
Mm.
so many like sad square boxes that just have no thoughtfulness where you ram your shin into the bed because no one really thought about the layout. And I think he spent more time taking notes on like what not to do
Mm.
and just like how important it is to spend time in this space and truly like think about it from the guest experience, not just mapping it out in the cloud.
Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, so well said. I am curious. It's one thing to build a beautiful escape for, one of the most important, if not the most important events of your life, right? Your wedding and your honeymoon. It's another thing to then decide, hey, let's build a hospitality business. So connect the dots for us a little bit from, the point of time where in which you guys realize on your honeymoon that this escape is so special. People need this disconnection, this reconnection with one another that you guys experienced during your stay. At what point in time do you feel like you should go and make this accessible to others?
Yeah, it was pretty immediate for us. So when we first got married, I was working in news. He's still in music. He's still with his band, right?
Yeah.
But it just the schedules were really hard. We were like ships passing in the night. And I was like, this doesn't feel sustainable.
Mm,
I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, but I kind of have that in my blood. I've just
mm,
always been one to want to like do something different and create my own journey. And he does. He comes from a family of entrepreneurs. And so, it was literally on our honeymoon that we were dreaming about our life and our future, what we wanted it to look like and the
mm,
environment that we would raise our future children in. And we were like, well, we want them to grow up in nature. We want them to learn how to serve others from a young age. We
mm.
want them to see and experience hard work. Like we want to do something with lasting impact. We want to help marriages, and all of that was just pointing to tree houses. And literally at our honeymoon, that's when we were like, this is what we need to do. And we just felt like, okay, this is our life's work.
Yeah.
We didn't have a specific idea of how big it would get or like a certain number of locations or units or anything in mind, just knowing like we want to give this our full attention because if we
Yeah.
do, it will grow. And like, let's see how far it can go.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing to see what it has come to be now. Now we have a 55-acre property with 23 villas on it, which is just wild. And we're not stopping there either. And so I think still to this day, we're not set on a certain number. It's just, are we maximizing our impact?
Yeah.
Because we're the type of people, we don't, this might, a lot of people might disagree with us, but like, we don't have any desire to retire. We want to build a life that like it's sustainable now. We're
Yeah.
resting now when we need to. But, for us, we're like, gosh, like, why would we want to just stop working if it's what we love and it's growing us and it's growing others? Like, let's do this for the rest of our lives. And so that is our plan.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow. I mean, that's beautiful to have such a crystal clear like mission and vision.
yeah,
It's funny. I have talked about this on this podcast before with some other guests, but in this world where so many of us spend most of our time on our laptops, on Zoom calls, and the need for sort of like retreat, I think is so much greater. And even if you don't spend your working hours in front of a screen or on phone calls all day or Zoom calls all day, if you've got children, I've got two young boys, and I mean, talk about just like the overstimulation of like two young children, right? Like
yeah,
my wife and I are just always talking about how overstimulated we are. It's like at the end of the day, we're just like, oh my gosh, I just need
yeah,
silence, right? I just need rest. And then you amplify that over weeks and months and years. And I actually think that there's never been a greater need for excellent hospitality than there is in 2024 going into 2025, right? Like people are exhausted, and no matter what line of work you work in, there's so much information. And so
yeah,
I actually think that like entrepreneurs in the hospitality sector have like a very important calling, which is to help the world like rest and help the world like restore. And I actually really believe that entrepreneurs building in this sector have almost like this like extra special duty to deliver that because it's what we all need.
yeah. So well said. It's true. If we want to keep, you know, living high output and fast paced lives, we do need to recharge because you can't work from an empty cup. I actually heard this analogy. I like it a lot, and so I can't take credit for it, but I'll share it. And this guy asked me, he said, how often do you change your tires, like on your regular
Mm,
vehicle? I'm like, I don't know, like once a year. He's like, well, what about race car drivers? How often do they change their tires? I'm like, well, yeah, probably like every 20 seconds. He's like, yeah,
wow.
the speed at which your life is and the level at which you operate means you need to change your tires more often. And so if you are a business owner or, a hardworking executive, like the once a year vacation's not going to cut it. You got to change your tires. And so like
Yeah.
for us, we found a rhythm of like these quarterly getaways has been really good for our relationship. Because even though we're in the business of helping people rest and reconnect, you'd be shocked how much work goes into making that happen. Right. And so we're like,
Yeah.
okay, we got to check ourselves in, and make sure that we're doing that too.
Yeah, yeah, wow, that's so well said. I love that analogy. I'm gonna steal that too. And
Yeah.
pretty soon we're not gonna know who actually said it because everyone's gonna be talking about it. But that's awesome. So I want to hear a little bit about the Netflix story because I really want to talk about this because you guys were building, I think, like right before this real boom in unique stays and experiential hospitality. So a lot of the folks that have come on this podcast as guests have actually referenced you guys as inspiration, and that's been awesome. But a lot of the folks who are tuning into today's episode have already built some development. Now they're maybe scaling up. We've got many listeners who are now trying to figure out the boutique hotel game, which is really exciting as well. But I think the core thing that unites behind the stays listeners are folks that want to build differentiated experiences, and that's really sort of that core driver. And specifically, experiences that are nature immersed, that help people reconnect with themselves, their loved ones, etc. You guys sort of got started on this earlier than some folks, and so I want to hear a little bit about the Netflix story and how that came to be, and then also what it was like to be kind of these early pioneers of quote unquote unique stays before it was something that everyone was talking about on loads of podcasts like this one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wish I could take credit for landing Netflix, but I cannot. It literally dropped in our lap. And I'm like, thank you, God. But the truth is, like the reason why they came knocking on our email door is that we built something beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Like we poured so much into making something really excellent. We didn't just cut corners or do it for as cheap as possible. We made it great. And we put a lot of work into selling and marketing it.
Mm,
And that kind of it starts with like the ripple effect. I remember our very first Treehouse, we were calling up the local news stations and the local influencers and this blog writer, like just small people you've never heard of, but they get the word out, and then people see that, and then they get the word out. And within 3 months of that happening with the first Treehouse, BuzzFeed reached out and was like, hey, we're doing a piece on the best Airbnbs in each state. And so like, that's how that happens. And I think the same thing happened with Netflix. They were like, wow, we're doing this episode on amazing vacation rentals. We're doing one on tree houses, doing our research and keep seeing you guys. Like, let's
Yeah.
talk. And so that just happened. But I think what I did well in that was responded very quickly. You have to realize, like, when it is the media or people on shows, like, they move at the speed of light. And I
Yeah.
know that because I worked in news. And so, like, if I didn't respond in a couple days, like, they're moving on. Like
Yeah.
crazy. So we just jumped on it. I remember Zooming with the executive producer like that afternoon. I'm like walking around with my laptop, giving him a tour. And maybe a month later, no, it was a little bit more than that. A few months later, like, they were out shooting the episode. So
Wow.
it's fast, but it was awesome. I still remember, like, it was an all hands on deck to get the property just sparkling. We're like, let's level up the landscaping, add all these things. And it was so fun and super exciting to be a part of that. Yeah, that was definitely a wild experience. And, to what you said about being pioneers, it's not always great to be pioneers, right? Like,
It's scary. Yeah, it's a
it's so
wild
scary.
wilderness.
You're like going into uncharted territory. And for us, that was the case. We opened up the first Treehouse in 2016. And like, I feel like this boom really happened in the pandemic when people are
Yeah.
wanting to get outside. So we had 4 years of like wandering in the wilderness on our own. And looking back, like, if I could have done anything different, it would have been investing in mentorship much sooner, because I can literally draw a correlation to when we started surrounding ourselves with people who had been there before or been a pioneer in a slightly different space, right? But like in business or in hospitality or in design, different elements that we could pull from. And gosh, like the wisdom that answering one question, could save us so much time or money or heartache. Something that I don't talk about a lot was our development in Charleston. So if you Google Bolt Farm Treehouse, you see our property in Tennessee on the mountain. It's beautiful,
Yep.
stunning, all the things. Well, before that was a development in Charleston, and it went terribly wrong. And I mean, it was a very beautiful build. We had 4 tree houses there. Each were one of a kind. Long story short, very long story short, this was like a 2-3 year saga.
Jeez.
But they didn't have zoning when we built, and they adopted anti-Airbnb laws soon after we opened. And we ended up finding ourselves in like this political battle for over a year to save our business, lost, had to sell the property. I mean, all the things, because we were navigating it ourselves and, there's so much that you don't know that when you're just starting out, and 2 young kids. And so like looking back, mentors would have saved us from even buying that property. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm grateful for the years that we spent learning lessons the hard way and crashing into the walls, because we like really earned our stripes, But it's cool over the last 3 years to see the growth that we've had. I mean, we opened and welcomed our first guests in Tennessee in June of 21.
Wow.
So less than
very
3
recent.
years.
Yeah.
And we've built 23 here and a spa and a wellness haven opening next month, like all the things. And it's like, wow, just surrounding yourself by people who have been there before can really change the game for you. And this year, actually, we started doing that for others. And I'm so passionate about it because growing Bolt Farm is our main focus and will continue to be. Like, there's so much that we want to still build here. But we're like, you know what? Like, that would have changed the game for us. And we want to help others get there faster and without all the pain that we went through. And so, because we are some of the OGs in this space, like we're like, okay, let's do that. Let's share that. So we've been doing workshops here where, short-term rental owners or boutique hotel operators, people who are either already in the industry trying to grow, or those who are just starting out.
Yeah.
And those are sometimes my favorite because they haven't made the mistakes yet. But we just like literally just bring them under the hood of Bolt Farm, share all we know. And it's been so life-giving. And it's something I'm really, really excited to continue to get to do.
So I was talking with some friends recently who listen to the podcast, many of whom have also been on the podcast. And we were remarking that the funny thing about the internet, right? The funny thing about hosting a podcast is you sort of are in the ears and, minds of people, lots of people every week. And yet you don't know most of those people, right? Like most of you listening to this podcast right now, like I've never met. I don't even know your names. It's crazy. And I want to change that. I want to get to know you guys. And so I want to eventually be able to throw like a behind the stage summit and, do a big live event. And we'll do that one day. But that day is not today, but we do have an opportunity to meet in person because I have just been invited by the folks at IMN to their short-term rental forum that they're hosting in January 15th through 16th at the JW Marriott in Miami. This is a premier event for top operators, owners, investors, and tech providers in the hospitality space, and specifically the short-term rental space. So they've invited me to come do some live podcasting. I'm going to be speaking at the event. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And I would love for this to be the opportunity where I get to meet a lot of you in person, right? Give you a handshake, right? Give you a hug if that's who you are. And the reality is, like, I have loved hosting this podcast. It's so amazing, and I'm so thankful to be able to talk to guests every single week. But right, my real love is people. I love networking. I love sharing ideas. I love collaborating. Right, I love sharing cocktails with folks and talking about the future. Right, and what better place to do that than at the short-term rental forum that IMN is hosting this January. So if I'm not reason enough to come, right? If this amazing event isn't reason enough to come, you should come because some of your favorite podcast guests who've been on this show and many others in the industry, they will also be at the event. So folks like Ben Wolf from Onera, folks like Isaac French from Live Oak Lake, folks like Mauricio Padilla and Emily Padan from Hinter, and folks like Matt Orley from Red Cottage, and so many more. As I mentioned, I'll also be podcasting live at the event. So once you register for the event, you'll get the opportunity to apply to be on the podcast. So if that's something that you'd like to do, I'd love to give BTS listeners preference to be featured at the actual event. Now, here's the kicker, right? So this event is January 15th through 16th in Miami at the JW Marriott. It's going to be absolutely amazing, right? But early bird pricing is available, but it ends this Friday, November 22nd. And because you're a listener of the show, you can use the discount code BTS, that's BTS as in behind the stays, for an extra 15% off that lowest rate. But again, that expires Friday, November 22nd. There's still plenty of time to, register for the event after. But if you want the best possible deal and you want 15% off of that best possible deal, be sure you register before Friday, November 22nd and use the discount code BTS at checkout. If you have any questions about the event, feel free to shoot me an email directly at zach@joinjourney.com, and I would love to share more details with you. But if you're ready to register, you can head on over to events.imn.org/STR25. You can lock in your spot, and then I will see you in Miami this January. Again, that's events.imn.org/STR25. If that's too long to remember, just scroll on down to the show notes and I have the link there. All right, guys, enjoy the episode. You guys are at this interesting sort of a crossroads between short-term rentals, vacation rentals, and a boutique hotel. Given that you guys have like 23 units on property, right?
Yeah.
You're definitely, I would argue, more hotel than you are sort of short-term rental. How have you guys thought through sort of your positioning, right? Because I think that glamping has obviously been around for a while as well, but I think in the last 2-3 years in particular, really coming out of the pandemic, glamping's seen this like massive boom, right? And glamping, used to mean maybe a nice-ish tent, right? Where it wasn't like on the floor, it was like a platform. And so you weren't like sleeping on the actual forest floor, right?
Right.
And now it could be everything from that to a $900 a night like spyglass treehouse thing like Ben Wolf from Onera does, right? And everything in between, like all that, depending on who you talk to, is quote unquote glamping. How have you guys thought as marketers yourselves? You come from news, right? Seth with NEEDTOBREATHE. I'm sure that he's been involved for years in kind of positioning the band, promoting it, etc. How have you guys thought about core positioning at Bolt Farm?
Yeah. We want to be the best. Best is the standard, is our number one core value. And it's been such a great guiding principle for our team when it's like, well, this would be easier or faster. It's like, is it the best? We want to be the best. And just from a business perspective, like it is so much easier to lower your rates if you have to than it is to raise your rates, right? Like, so start at the top and And I think that brand positioning is something that we've also thought about too, like knowing that there are so many competitors in this space. Like what sets you apart? You
Yeah.
know, and if you can be the best, if you can have every single luxury amenity, heated marble floors, like how many tree houses have that? You know, it's just like all these little things can really set you apart. And so while it costs us far more to build, you know, our tree houses than it would a canvas tent, you know,
Yeah.
it's like you can command more and you can offer a richer guest experience. And so that has really helped us. We've thought like, okay, how can we, we want to continue to increase ADR. We've 10x'd our ADR since we opened. It's crazy
Wow.
for our
Wow.
treehouse,
Amazing.
you know.
That's
I think the
amazing.
first one literally started out at $111 a night. Uh,
Wow. Wow.
Wild. But you know, just to really be able to offer excellence and offer the best. And we're finding that people are happy to pay top dollar for an excellent experience. And they would almost rather do that than spend $300 a night on something very basic.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
instead, we have positioned ourselves to be like the highest tier of luxury glamping.
Yeah.
And then we keep evolving and making ourselves better to meet the guest needs. And that's why we opened a spa this year. You know, we're like, okay, well, you're right. We are really evolving from Airbnb to a wellness, to a nature retreat, and now to a wellness resort. And so we need to
Mm.
make sure we have the amenities and offerings to meet that, you know, and over the course of time too, you know, guests, they used to just stop at the grocery store on their way here and cook their own meals. And now that they're paying more per night, they don't want to do that. They want to have meals made for them and not have to worry
Yeah.
about food. And so that's something else that we introduced this year. And so, but the feedback has been overwhelmingly great. And so I think, you know, for operators, you just have to think about where you want to be in the marketplace, how you want to position your brand. But just to keep in mind, like it's so dangerous to get into like discount mentality, and like
Yeah.
soon you'll find yourself in a race to the bottom, and we're
Yep.
all listing tree houses for $200 a night. It's like, gosh, hospitality is a lot of work. Like we're all
Yeah.
in this industry because we love it, right? Because there's just easier ways to make money. So you may as well maximize your profitability for what you're doing, because construction and development is not cheap and it's very intensive, right? So how can you maximize what you have? And the best way to do that is by maximizing ADR.
Yeah, yeah, so well said. I want to talk about how you guys have thought about the expansion of your portfolio in terms of unit types beyond tree houses to you've got mirror houses now, you've got domes, and I want to do that in a second. But first, I think one of the big questions folks have is when they get to sort of your guys' size, or maybe they're at 5 to 10 units, but they have the property and the zoning to allow for double or triple that amount. The question does become, how do we layer in amenities to delight guests so that it does feel much more like a resort and a lot less like maybe sort of a traditional kind of getaway? Now I guess they're called postcard cabin sort of experience, where like you go, you have these beautiful like little units, right? It's great, but there's no like group amenities really. It's really meant for a 1 or 2 night stay maybe, and the idea is to kind of just get lost in nature.
Mhm.
Now we're seeing sort of, I think, this progression of people want, some people anyways, and I would say a growing number of people want sort of that nature immersed experience, but they still want the ability to go to a restaurant or, you know, book a massage at a spa or something like that. So I think the question for a lot of hospitality entrepreneurs who are tuning into this conversation today is, how do you know when the time is to introduce these amenities? And then how did you guys think through which amenity to introduce first?
Mhm. It's a really mind-blowing strategy that we applied. We asked our guests what they wanted.
And spa ranked number one.
I know. I know, it's true, and I know it's, like, ridiculously simple. There was definitely more research that went into that, of course, but we forget to just talk to our guests. We spend so much
Yeah.
time trying to read their minds and how are we gonna craft marketing language that speaks to our audience. It's like, just listen to them. They'll tell you. So, like,
Yeah.
sorry for a quick digression, but like literally, so for marketing, like we just read our guest reviews and we're like, what are they saying? What are they
Mm.
excited about? You know, we have a Facebook group with about 20,000 people in it. Most of them are guests, but some of them are like, we're on their bucket list, you know? And so we pull them
Wow.
all the time. We're like, hey, which bed do you like? This one or this one? Like, we're thinking about doing food. What's important to you? Would you rather
Mm.
it be delivered to your room, or do you want a social opportunity? Do you want this? Like, we ask them so many questions because they'll tell you what they want. It would be a shame to spend all this time and money developing something that they don't care about. And
Yeah.
the results have surprised us sometimes because we did a survey and asked them about different programming, like different types of events.
Mm,
And top of the list was like wine tastings and pairings. So simple to execute. And
yeah.
we had all these other things that were like, a fireside dinner or all these things. And they were like, well, we just want to do wine tastings. Great. Thank you so much. So, and even if you don't have a 20,000 uh, audience of a Facebook group, like if you have 100 customers, like ask them, like they'll tell
Yeah.
you. So that's really what we leaned on, but also thinking about like scalability and like what made sense for our team and the operational side as well. Like, could we deliver on this? And what's the easiest way that we can do this at scale? So,
Yeah.
um, we're always really running it through that filter too about like, okay, as we grow, if we're at 23 units now, if we double in size, like, does this still work? Because we don't want to
Yeah.
have to reinvent the wheel for that. And so it was a little bit of both. Like, okay, demand is there. And as our nightly rate continued to increase, we're like, okay, like we need to offer food, And so I think it was just kind of a natural progression. But yeah, making sure that you talk to your audience, getting private feedback as well as the public reviews, talking to them.
Yeah.
Like, I certainly don't get to talk to every guest, but we do these happy hours 3 times a week. And every now and then, probably a couple times a month, Seth and I will go. And I just talk to everyone in the room, and I'm literally I have my phone out with my notes app, and I'm just taking feedback of like what they loved about their stay, and if they could wave a magic wand, what else would be there? And they have
Yeah.
great ideas.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's just a reminder that like some of the best feedback is really just like you taking the time to do the simplest thing, which is
Yeah.
just talk to the people that are already excited about you
Yeah.
and ask them what more they'd want or need. On that note, Tori, I'm curious when it comes to additional amenities like the spa and F&B programs. I think one of the hard things for folks to figure out, right, is do you offer these all the time, right? 7 days a week? Do you only open F&B for the weekends? Is the spa only available Sunday through Wednesday? Like, how have you
Mhm.
guys thought about operationally how to service the amenities? What sort of thought went into that?
Yeah. It's definitely challenging since hospitality is 365, 24/7. And even though people know that, like your team still will meet you with resistance of like, oh, do I have to work weekends? It's like, yeah, those are our highest paying guests.
Yeah.
For us, it was important for us to be able to offer the same experience to all guests.
Mhm.
Because your weekend guests, in our case, are paying the most, so you don't
Yep.
want to skimp them. But then weekdays can, historically be tougher to fill, and so you want to load them up with the amenities. You don't want to withhold that. And so for us, we were like, okay, it's got to be available to all guests. How do we make that feasible? And so with our spa, we did start out with the 6 days a week,
Okay.
and then as we were able to expand and go from there. And then food, like we actually have a very, very simple food program. I think our food offering will evolve in time.
Yeah.
We're definitely not trying to build a restaurant, and no beef to anyone who has or owns a restaurant, but gosh, it's so much work goes into it, right? It's like there's no
Yeah.
way to keep that like very light, small staffed and whatnot. And so we're in a remote area, so we were thinking about staffing and food spoilage and all these things. And really our guests, talking to them, pulling them, they don't care about fancy fine dining. They just want their food needs to be met so they don't have to go anywhere. So we were
Yeah.
able to partner with a semi-local, like family-owned business who does these chef-made meals that
Ah,
are pre-made, and our guests just heat them up in their pizza oven. So they're
wow.
simple, they're yummy. Like you can't live off of them, but you can eat them for a week,
Yeah.
and be happy. And so that's what we do. And until our guests share that they want more, or we feel the need to level it up further, that's what we do. And it was a way to keep it so simple, keeping it consistent for every guest.
That's amazing. And do you guys one of the things that I'd love to see somebody do at some point, right, is find a way, especially in areas where there is sort of a higher concentration of these like unique stays, for folks to kind of partner, and like what would it look like for folks to come in together to be able to do some sort of restaurant that's like equidistant between people's properties and whatnot? Have you had conversations with folks like this? Like, are there active discussions about people? Like, I think about, I always pick on Hocking Hills, right? Because some of my favorite people are like,
Beautiful.
are building and have built just remarkable stays there. But I'm like, why don't, and I've been there multiple times, and there's like nothing to eat, and there's like nowhere to go for like even a coffee, right? Like unless you're going to go to Columbus, which is only 45 minutes away. So it's not
Still though, you're
horrible.
not driving 45 minutes for a coffee. That's crazy.
Exactly. And so I'm like, there are so many of you guys, and you guys are clearly catering to the same kinds of guests who are looking for these really cool, elevated, unique experiences. Why can't people go in together? And they're all so close, by the way. Like, they're not far from each other. So it's like, is there momentum to go in together and build a restaurant or a cafe offering, whatever? Tori, do you guys have conversations like this with other folks in the space?
Honestly, we have not, but I think it's brilliant. As you're sharing that, I'm like, that makes so much sense. I know for us, we're pretty remote, so there's
Yeah.
not. I mean, we're 45 minutes from Chattanooga, 25 minutes from like a recognizable town,
Yeah.
like that you would know. But so I guess the Hocking Hills, that example doesn't so much apply to us. But yeah, if there were other players in the space, it's like absolutely, like join forces and go on it together. That or like I love the idea of a food truck model, right? And for us,
Yes.
like we just currently don't have enough demand for it to make sense for them. Maybe at 50 units we would. But
Yeah.
like we're also always thinking about, yeah, who could we work with to make this feasible? And
Yeah.
so since there are not other properties super close by to us right now, we're instead thinking of like, okay, well, what local catering companies can we work with and bring in chefs or catering companies to have these cool experiences, yet it's not like all on us to set up a restaurant from scratch. So I think
Yeah.
there's so much power in collaboration, and people should lean into it and not be afraid of it.
Oh, I love it. So well said. I want to talk about unit types because
Yeah.
this is sort of a question that so many folks have. And I get questions from listeners on this all the time is like, how do people decide what units to go with? And obviously you can read blogs, you can listen to podcasts, you can go to like glamping shows and sort of like understand how these units look and feel. But at the end of the day, it does seem like people just choose what they like the most is the only sort of through line I've been able to see here. How did you guys go from deciding to not just offer tree houses, but also domes and then mirror houses as well? What was that sort of like discernment process like?
Yeah. So for us, we actually let the land dictate the unit
Mm,
type. So tree houses are, that's where we started. That came from Seth's love for tree houses, and they're just a sense of magic and wonder in tree houses,
yeah.
right? And so that's where we started. As we were looking for land in Tennessee, we had a very, very specific checklist of what we were looking for, and we looked for a long time. And it's like finding a unicorn in a haystack, right? To find like a property where every single villa has a front row view, not just like
Yeah.
one. So it was
Yeah.
super challenging. So we found this property. It was perfect. It checked every box, and like within moments of stepping foot on it, I'm like, this is it. Like this is magic. Only one catch is the portion of land that we were able to buy at the time. We have 55 acres now, but we started with 18. It
Okay.
was all cleared. There weren't really many trees, and we were like,
Mm,
oof, like they had like a beetle infestation years ago and cut the trees down. So
wow.
we were like, well, how's that going to work? And so we had been, we're always like looking and getting inspiration. And Seth had seen these domes in Europe and was intrigued by them. We never built a dome, never even stayed in a dome. Honestly. I just thought they were really cool. We also thought they would be maybe a little more affordable to build. We ended up being wrong, probably because of the timing. We built them during the pandemic when building was at a sky high. But really, it was the lay of the land. We're like, this land is perfect. There's no trees here. What else can we build? We're on a mountain. Domes are aerodynamic,
Mm,
like perfect, like with the
yeah.
wind and the shape. Like, let's do it. We wanted to push our creativity. Let's try it. And so we did it. We leaned in and just took a big swing on the domes, and they're amazing, And we did them a little bit differently. We made them ourselves, so they all have like a wooden frame that you can see and touch. And so that's what led us to domes. And then the mirror cabins also informed by the land. So we were able to buy more like adjacent parcels. And so now we have, some bluff frontage with trees where we built more tree houses. And then there is some land that's a little bit more forested. And like tree houses would have been fine there too, but we wanted our tree houses to all have a consistent view. We're like, well, what would be really magical surrounded by forests? I'm like, mirrors, reflecting
Mm,
nature. And how cool is this? And we had just started seeing those again in Europe. They weren't in the US yet. And so that's what inspired it. Because then we were like, cool, like this is also scalable as we buy more property that has, if we find a property that's just one thing or whatever, we have something that can work for all of it. And then we stopped there. It'd be so easy to want to make everything like a one of a kind, and
yeah.
like hats off to people who have the creativity and time to do that. But for us, we are thinking about efficiency and scalability with business. And so we're like, okay, how do we keep our menu essential, of options as small as possible and just end it there?
Yeah. Have you guys noticed any sort of meaningful difference between the units guests choose to stay in, and are ADRs like pretty all over the place? Are they relatively consistent? Any sort of learnings from how guests respond to the different unit types, and then also from a business perspective, how the different unit types perform?
Yeah, yeah. And the data honestly surprised me a bit. So from an ADR standpoint, our mirror cabins are the most budget friendly. And then it goes to domes and then tree houses. And same for size as well. Mirror
Okay.
cabins, right? About 200 square feet inside. They all have like a really nice outside terrace as well. Domes are like 500 square feet, and tree houses are a little bit bigger than that. And what surprised me was that people really do care about square footage. Like the
Mm,
mirror cabins are so beautiful. I'm in one right now. They're so incredibly unique. And people love them, don't get me wrong. But we noticed we had a harder time like educating the market about it and like creating demand for them because people they would rather spend a little more money and have a little more space. And so that was super
yeah.
surprising. I love our mirror cabins, and I think if we build more, we'll do a custom design and make them like a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
People really want the space where they can feel like they can unpack their suitcase, make themselves at home. And that's better for owners and operators, right? Because then they're going to have longer stays. And
Yeah.
so there was that. And then I feel like between Treehouse and Dome, it really comes down to just like the budget. People who want to go big, people who are like celebrating an anniversary or birthday, they're like, send me to the penthouse. I want the treehouse, And then
Yeah.
those who are like, okay, I've been saving up for a long time. Like, just get me anywhere that works. So it's been a nice little variety.
Yeah, it's nice to have sort of those different unit types too, so that as you guys continue to scale and grow, you have some more concrete data on like,
Yeah.
okay, great. What we're finding is that these tree houses, if we just build four of them, we'll fill them. Versus like, oh, you know what? Like maybe there's opportunity to build more mirror houses because they're cheaper to build and cheaper to to stand up, and right, we are finding that guests really, really love to be able to stay and have the Bolt Farm experience at a slightly more affordable rate. So it's
Right.
cool to just have some differentiated data points to pull from as you continue to grow. And I think that that's one of the things that some folks lose when they go all in on one unit type. Is there's always that sort of like question in the back of your head. It's like, okay, cool, the safari tents are doing great, but what if we did domes, or what
Yeah.
if we did the A-frames, or what have you? So very
Yeah.
cool that you guys have a diverse portfolio. I want to ask about how you and Seth do all of this, because Seth is still active in his band Need to Breathe. You were I think you guys just had a kid. You guys have a few
A
kids, is that
1 year
right?
old.
How many kids do you guys
Yeah.
have? A one year
What?
old. You have a 1 year old. Yeah. You see, you just had a kid, right? So you have a 1 year old. You're I mean, you guys are running this amazing hospitality company. Like how are you guys balancing all of this, and maybe what have you learned about how to lean into each other's strengths
Yeah.
and also weaknesses, and how do you guys manage all of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking about trying to be funny and being like lots of caffeine, but no. But the truth is, we have an amazing team,
Yeah.
phenomenal team of people who are experts in their craft, and I'm just so humbled at the caliber of people that we get to work with. It started out literally me, Seth, and one other person who
Wow.
handled guest comms and sales and everything. And then it grew, and our team has looked very different as we've grown, right? Because we've had a business at one unit, 4, 10, 15, now 23. And so we've been very intentional about building an all-star winning team. And I spend a lot of my time on the team building and recruiting, because it's so important. You're only as good as your people. And
Yeah.
it's so hard in hospitality. You've got to find people that really care and
Yeah.
love people, right? Because your guests are going to feel that through them. Like they're encountering every guest, you're not. And so that's super huge and just a huge priority for us. And so, yeah, investing into our team has been huge. And then also we love what we do, you know?
Yeah.
And so, we've really we lean into the term work-life blend
Mm,
over work-life balance, right? Because balance for
mm,
me at least creates this visual of like, okay, well, it's got to be 50-50 and I've got to have this amount of time that I'm not talking about work. But like, if it's what lights you up, as long as it's like giving you life, right? Like, then
yeah.
don't punish yourself for doing that. And so, what we do is, I have a hard end time for my day because we have a 1-year-old, right? And
Yeah.
then we have family time. And then after she goes down, which is still very early, like we decide if we want to just be done for the day and have dinner and do our thing, or if we want to do what we call a victory lap, where it's just
Mm,
more work. And there, it's like, it's always, we try to make it like work that's on the business, not like the in the weeds stuff, because you don't want to be solving low level problems at 8 p.m. It's just
yeah.
demoralizing, right? So, but like more often than not, we're like, we want to do a victory lap. Let's do it. Like, why wouldn't you want to push your dreams further? And so I feel very lucky that I get to work with my spouse. It's not for everybody. For those who do, like they get it. Like you're sharing common goals, common obstacles. Like there's no need to catch you up on the day because you're just in it, you know? And so
Yeah.
that works really, really well for us. And I think also just becoming a parent more than ever is reminding me like you have to give yourself grace and know that there's different seasons. Like you might have a season that's just like you're grinding because you've got to open these 5 new units or whatever. And then you might have a slower season where you can really exhale and let your team really shine. And so knowing when to lean in and when to take those breaks has been important for us.
Yeah, on that note too, having recently become a parent myself,
Yeah.
we've got two boys under two, and so
Wow.
I think one of the things that I've learned anyways is that you have to be. It actually makes you a better entrepreneur because you have to be all the more disciplined with your time because there are so many competing interests, right? And you
Mhm.
want to be present to your kids, but you also understand that like you're building something and that thing is valuable too, and it's important as well. And I have found, at least for me, that there's just very little room for like fluff
Yeah.
and sort of like, scroll time, like all the things I used to sort of treat myself to or like excuse as like, oh, I can spend 30 minutes doing this or, an hour watching this show or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Those things actually become a little bit harder to justify because you have to use that time in other areas. But I think that net, it's actually just made me much more efficient. And I've heard this from other entrepreneurs and other friends in the space of like, no, like actually having kids is great because it just highlights all the things in your life. Having kids highlights all the ways in which you're selfish, number one, and then number two, it also highlights all the things in life that like are maybe important but not the most important, and it definitely highlights things that aren't that important at all that have spent years spending time doing. So I'm pro kids for entrepreneurs because I actually think it makes you a better business person.
So well said. Yeah. Yeah. It forces you. Yeah. You got to say no to a lot of things to be able
Yeah.
to say yes to the main thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Tori, I've got like one final question for you, which is as you guys think about the next step, the next phase, the next chapter, pick your word of Bolt Farm, what comes to mind? How are you guys thinking about your next season?
Yeah. I think, earlier I mentioned the coaching and the workshops that we started doing this year. That's going to be a big focus for this next season
Nice.
because we have built the team that can run it without us, with, the run of the day to day, which is such a blessing.
Yeah.
That being said, we're still immersed in it. We're like in it every day. We love it. But now this gives us the opportunity to kind of, you know, zoom out, see the big picture and be able to really help others. And it's something that personally gives us life and will
Mm.
also help Bolt Farm expand. I don't know, Seth might kill me for sharing this. I might be sharing too much, but I'm going for it anyways.
Do it.
Is like in terms of expansion, yes, we're expanding here, right? And like we want to build out this property to its fullest. And then we want to take this multi-site across the country.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what is even faster than starting from scratch time and time again is partnering with other people, right? In different capacities. And we get asked probably once a week or once every other week about different partnership opportunities. And for a decade, we've said no. We've just been like head down doing our thing. And now we're like, you know what? There might be opportunity to partner with people in some
Yeah.
way. But because we've spent a decade building this brand, we would not do that with just anyone. We don't take that lightly at all. It's got to be someone that they're in it for the right reasons. They have an exceptional product, like all the things. And like, so honestly, on top of paying it forward and helping others with the workshops, it gives us the opportunity to meet others in the space and see, okay, is there synergy here? Like, could we see ourselves working with them? And so that's another way that we're going to be expanding our brand and our footprint. And so it's just something that we're really excited about and going to be doing more of. So,
Oh, that's amazing. And are you guys sort of thinking like maybe there's a franchising option, or are you thinking like a true kind of like referral, a small alliance of properties or something like that? Or if it's too
yeah.
much, you don't
Yeah,
you don't
no,
need you don't need to share here. But
I think there's a world where I think it could be both
yeah,
and some things in between. With development, it's hard to have like an ABC menu. Like you kind of have to
yeah,
find each deal is specific to find the win-win for each party. And so I think both things you described could exist. Just matter like what it comes down to the right people and the right timing. And so yeah, these workshops are a great way to just like kind of do like a test run of like
yeah.
meeting people and working together and seeing if there's potential for that.
And what I'll just say too is, and maybe I hope you've experienced this. I imagine you have, Tori. But this whole industry of folks like who are now building these remarkable next gen stays. I don't know a single person that like went to school for this,
Yeah.
right? And people are like wildly open and wildly generous with information sharing. People are just people this is like their heart and soul that they're pouring into these places. And because of that, they're so willing, at least I found, for
Mhm.
folks to collaborate and to share like details that in I think other industries, in other businesses, people wouldn't share, but people are so transparent. And I think that's just something so beautiful about this space that I hope we can like retain and hold on to as it begins to professionalize a little more.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've experienced that as well. And that's how we approach it too. People who've attended our workshops were like shocked that we were sharing like all of our numbers and all the
Yeah.
things. We're like, well, we want to help you. Like we can't do that by censoring ourselves. So,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think just having that abundance mindset, when you really zoom out and think about how many people are on this planet or even in this country alone, right? And then for us, like, even though I feel we've grown a lot over the years, but at the end of the day, we're a 23-room hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nothing. There's plenty of people to keep us full, even when we double, right? And so, for all the other people who have these micro resorts or boutique hotels, it's like, okay, when you compare it to these Hiltons with hundreds and hundreds of rooms, it's like we're going to be fine keeping it full.
Yeah.
Like just make something great, have an abundance mindset, help each other, and let's do this. Let's create something meaningful.
Well, I think you both already have, and I'm excited to continue to see you guys grow and take the brand to even greater levels. But Tori, thank you so much for your time. For our listeners, I'll have links if you're not already familiar with Bolt Farm. I'll have links to their website, their Instagram handles, all the fun stuff in the show notes below. But Tori, thanks for spending an hour with us and sharing a little bit about your story. I really appreciate it. It's amazing to meet you, not in person, but in a little bit more of an intimate setting than on Netflix, right? And other podcasts. So really appreciate sort of the work that you and Seth have done. You've been huge champions of the space. And I know a lot of our listeners today have been inspired by your story.
Thank you. That means so much, especially coming from you.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.